at the beginning, I remember quite a bit about as we got together, as we had our tea and cake, suddenly memories came back. And at the end of 7 years, I remembered so much which I've almost forgotten. But because of you and your question and the way you questioned me, and you was very patient for my stories, in the end, I used to look forward very, very much for the next session of interviews, especially the tea and cake. A very, very great job. It must have been very difficult for you to actually entwine the love story of Mary and my war members. You did a wonderful job, and I originally, when we first got together, the idea was that when I died, at least some of my stories, some of the terrible battles, what we went through, I felt that it had to be told. And as I got older, most of my contemporaries had died, and I realised that when I died, obviously they would be lost. But you came along at the right moment. They always say that a person is in the right place at the right time, and you were in the right place at the right time. And you have taken my stories, and including the lovely love story of Mary and myself, and you have achieved something which I am always so very, very grateful to you for what you did and what you have produced. Yes, hours and hours of work, all the research you did. The only place I have been back to Italy quite a few times, and obviously been to a casino. As you know, we almost got to casino, but because we were pulled back, because the idea was to cut them off by Anzio, but we never actually in action at casino. But Anzio was, well, it was almost Dunkirk over again in a small way. Yeah. I mean, we were absolutely hemmed in. Everything was compact together. There wasn't a space where you could say, I am safe. Every yard of that area at the end was packed with people. It was terrifying because people were being killed and injured beside you. Who was going to be next? And when we looked over our shoulders, there was the sea. They pushed us all the way back. Yes, the Italian campaign, a lot of people probably didn't realise that Italy was a wonderful country, wonderful mountains, hills, but the terrain for fighting the war, it wasn't the right terrain, no.
Well, thank you.
It's an interesting story here because Frank Allen and myself, as you probably have been told, there were certain sections. There was always 2 people together, 4 or 6, 8, depending what the battle was and the circumstances. And Frank and I was always together, always worked together. There were a lot of casualties reported, and 12, it was decided that we needed 12 medical orderlies because there was such a lot of casualties. And we were going out at midnight, so this is already said. At night it was very difficult because they couldn't see the Red Cross arm. Unfortunately, I was taken ill about 2 or 3 hours before midnight, and although I pleaded to go with the rest of them and with Frank, the medical officer said, no, you can't go with them because you might be a weak link, you might fall ill. No, you've got to be replaced. And they replaced me by another medical orderly. And of those 12 people, those 12 orderlies who went out, none of them came back. 6 were killed and 6 were wounded and taken prisoner, and Frank Allen was one who was captured and injured with his arm. And the man who was called up at the last minute to take my place, he died so that I could live.
Yeah.
And the reason that I was taken ill like that is because of all the strain and stress. Eventually it got to me and I suffered a very, very severe attack of what is known as shingles, herpes zoster actually. And I was therefore transferred to a hospital, and finally I had 2 or 3 weeks convalescent at Sorrento, where the British had a convalescent home, and when I recovered I went back to the unit, to the 214. The most favourite to me was the great relief when the war ended. As you know, we had pushed up Italy slowly. You talk about D-Day Dodgers. The reason why we were slow moving up Italy was due to the fact that most of the armaments, most of the munitions, most of the reinforcements was all collected in England for D-Day. I think there's a piece in the book where in some parts the artillery only had 3 shells to fire each day because they couldn't get supplies there because they were building up for Italy. Eventually, when war, we were happy about that because we in Italy got to surrender the Germans. I think it's 3 or 4 days before we did in all Europe. So we thought, we were the first in Europe, the Salerno, and we were the first to get the Germans to surrender. We ended up, we were 50 miles from Venice. That's as far as we got after the Gothic line. And the news came through, great. Then we had an order. We were attached to the London Division, the Queen's Regiment, and they had an order to move as fast as they could into Venice because the New Zealanders on the left side were going to be in Venice first. So we didn't have too much time to celebrate because off we went to try and get to Venice before the New Zealanders, and we did get there. We got there, I think, half an hour before the New Zealanders did. And I think that was the most happiest time. War ended, finished, okay, and we're the first in Venice. Super.